I'm afraid to be alone. I'm afraid to start over. I'm afraid of blowing up my family. Do any of these fears about divorce, or even just the thought of divorce, have you feeling like you're stuck in a tunnel of fear? Hi, welcome to your Fab Divorce Talk with Lauren and Lori. I'm Lori, your love and relationship coach.
And I'm Lauren, your becoming coach, and together we are your Fab Divorce coaches. We get together every week on Fab Talk to talk about topics that are important to you. And we know it because these are the same issues that our clients bring up to us over and over. So make sure you subscribe and check us out because we are talking about topics that are going to help you through your divorce.
This week, we are talking about all the boogeyman fears that surround you when you're getting divorced. A lot of our clients will describe this feeling like they're stuck in a tunnel, and it's dark and it's scary, and they don't know where they're going, and they can't see back to where they began. And it really becomes kind of like a brooder that's incubating a lot of the crappy emotions that create this big ball of fear. Things like guilt and shame. Those are the things that create the anxiety that leave us feeling stuck.
Absolutely, Lori. Here's the thing. All right, people may have heard that acronym for fear, false evidence appearing real. But the truth is, when you are in a big transition like divorce, you might have very, very real evidence, right? You may need to find a new place to live. You may need to uproot your kids. You may not know exactly, how the money is going to separate and work. And there is, when you look at we've all heard of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, this is the bottom. Like, this is really important, big stuff that you could be dealing with. But like you said, is there's a difference between being afraid, having fear, and just not knowing and needing to figure it out, right? So again, this is what we do so much in the Fab Divorce is help people like move from fear to figuring it out.
I think it's really important that we begin to understand the role of fear in our lives, and especially when we're talking about divorce, because fear is actually a protective mechanism. It is actually there to keep us protected when there are obstacles or things that we are uncertain of and don't know how to move through. So if we kind of keep that in mind, sometimes it's really helpful to say, then, okay, how can I use it for my benefit? So I think I definitely, that's one of the things we talk about in Fab Divorce. But I think for today's conversation, let's really unwrap the way that we can make fear our friend and be the master of our own fears versus, um, letting it control us and keep us stuck. Now, I know one of the things that we hear all the time when we talk about the kind of the big three, that things that people are afraid of when it comes to divorce. And the number one thing is, I'm afraid of the effect it's going to have on my kids. And you can see right away there how fear becomes a protective mechanism.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's important for people to understand, right, that our brains are always working for us, right? That's, they're designed. Our brains are designed to work for us and be that protective mechanism. It's like raising the red flag when there's danger, right? So just remember that fear is just like letting you know that something scary is going on. And it doesn't mean it's insurmountable, right? It just means it's something scary going on. And a lot of people stop there. They get into the fear and they just sit, they feel paralyzed. They just get stuck, literally get stuck. But understanding that emotion, that energy, that feeling, the chemicals that all come from that and the way your body feels, if you think of it as a signal, that it's alerting you that something has to change in some way, you can just start to get curious about it and say, okay, wait a minute. Like, I know that I'm afraid for what's going to happen to my kids, but this doesn't have to paralyze me. I can still move forward and figure it out. I just need to know that that's alerting me that this is one of the really big things that's important to me.
Yeah, it is huge because you are, and it's one of that big fear of disrupting and uprooting your kids and your family life is it's a lot to feel afraid of because it's not just the immediate impact that you fear, but it's the fear like what's going to be the long-term impact on my kids because either I'm deciding to do this or the decision has been made that we're going to do this, and now how is that going to work? And for women, it's a huge thing because we are the caretakers, we are the ones responsible. So I think one of the things that's really important to recognize about that is reality, understanding the reality of the situation, and instead of lamenting about what coulda, shoulda, would have been, this is where we are. And not letting fear, again, keep you stuck in the tunnel, but use it for the great protective mechanism it can be to figure out ways as I'm going through my divorce and as I'm deciding the kind of divorce I want, how am I going to protect my kids, about some of the things that are coming up or could come up. So who do I want to be? How do I want this divorce to look? And where can I go from there to keep that fear at bay and protect them the way I want to?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like highlighting to you what's super important. And so you'll know where you need to put your energies. But getting stuck there, often because fear comes attached to other things, right? It comes attached to guilt. It comes attached to, right, things that you don't have any control over, what's going to happen in the long term to them. I think that that's what's important to pull apart is, am I getting caught in the emotion of it? Or am I allowing this to just alert me to the fact that this is an area that I need to start feeling some control over so that I can start moving on, so I can keep moving forward? And knowing things like kids are incredibly resilient and they're not the only ones. You know? And life changes for so many reasons that are out of our control.
And I
And the result would be the same in this situation, right? If there was a death, if there was some other loss, if you had to move cities, like there's so many things that create change that once you get past that fear and guilt, you start to be able to pull it apart a little bit and understand what is the best I can do in this moment.
and that's a great point. And I think another point to piggyback on that and put them together is they will follow your lead.
Yeah,
And
great
so
point.
if you, again, make that decision, be intentional about who you want to be and what kind of situation you want to create within your divorce and your after divorce life, including your kids, they will follow your lead. So if you are fearful, they're going to be fearful. If you are angry and revengeful and all that other stuff, they are going to consume that exact energy and act accordingly. So again, I love the point that you make is that it is a protective mechanism, but it's an indicator, right? It's we use that emotion as an indicator where we're off balance or where we're off. And then how can I look through what the reality is and then use that fear to inform decisions to have the outcome that I want. So that's like golden, girly. And what I love about all this stuff is that you can take off your coach hat, your becoming coach hat, and pull on your therapist hat and get into the grooves in ways that I think are really, really helpful. So let me that get you to put that hat on to discuss the second fear that people that comes up a lot is finances. I'm really afraid of my finances and am I going to be able to survive financially? So we just talked about fear being a protective mechanism. How does fear work in a situation where that's a reality? That's a reality because divorce really takes a toll on women. I mean, all the research is there that the after divorce life of women is definitely financial difference. So how does fear protect you there, or does it?
You know, again, when you're talking finances, you're really talking about that first tier of those hierarchy of needs, right? We're talking about like food and shelter. I mean, really basic things, just, health, food, and shelter, just making sure that you are okay. So it makes sense. First of all, don't beat yourself up over being afraid. Like, we just layer it on so much as women, right? Like, so, okay, we're afraid. And now I feel guilty and afraid. And now I feel like dumb for feeling guilty and afraid. The truth is, stop piling. It doesn't help, right? Recognize it, recognize the emotion. Just let the emotion tell you that this is something that you're going to have to figure out. That's how fear helps. I mean, again, like it's sounding the alarms, right? It's the early warning system that there's something going on that you're going to need to figure out. So, starting to figure it out is the antidote to the fear.
Yeah. And I think a big thing with trying to figure it out again is going back to what's the reality. This is what it is. And pushing away again the woulda, coulda, shouldas and dealing with what the reality is. And one of the things that helped me when I was going through, because that was a big thing, because, I got divorced at 60. I hadn't been in the workforce for 20 years. I mean, I had been doing other things to generate income, but not in any way that I had to be, my lifestyle depended on my income. And so that was a huge fear. That was something that kept me from pulling the trigger for a long time. Like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And there comes a point where you literally just have to pull on your big girl panties and say, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but what I do know is that I am going to do this. So it really is for something like that, that is a major fear and it's really grounded in reality. You have to, it is a mindset shift that I don't know how, and I don't need to figure it out right now while I'm figuring out all these other things. I need to concentrate on the why. Why I need to get out of this marriage and disrupt my financial situation. Because it's you're either pushing yourself with a why that's good enough that you're like, I can't take this anymore, or you're being pushed out and then it's out of your hands anyway. But the reality is still, I've got to decide why this is going to be important to me. And my why was, you know what? All my life, I have been pretty much taken care of. This is my opportunity, that whether I like it or not, to take care of myself. And you know what, Lauren? I did it. I did.
In full living color, you did it. And, this is the root of confidence, right? This is the root of confidence. Confidence isn't, we don't get confident because we have all the answers. Confidence comes from knowing that we can figure it out. It's trusting ourselves to be able to figure it out. There are realities here. Living situations may change. Lifestyles, may change. Things are going to change for you. They're going to change for your family, whether that's your kids, even in-laws, your parents. Like, things change for the people around you. What's important to look at, I always like to say, if you can't control, let it roll. And it's figuring out what you can control, right? If you can't control, if it's something that is completely out of your control, your partner asked for a divorce, out of your control. you have to, you know, use your coping mechanisms. It's something that we talk, you know, that we talk a lot about. We'll talk a lot about them here. We deal with it a lot in your F.A.B divorce. Like, there's plenty of coping mechanisms to use in the short term and in the long term to get through the stuff that you need to just let roll because you can't control it. But what can you control? Sit down and literally start figuring it out. And I love the idea of figuring out what you have control over. Like, literally list your fears, get it all out, and then look one by one. Is this something I have control over? If it's not, that's something you're going to have to breathe your way through, find other coping mechanisms to deal with, but let go. The things you can control, what's the next first thing? And you start moving through that list and taking back control where you can. That's what will help push you out of that sort of fear paralysis.
I also think one of the things that as you're coping, and this is one of the things that we talk a lot about in the F.A.B divorce class, is preparing, right? Just don't cope to deal with what's going on today, but preparing yourself for what you want your life to be on the aftermath. So financially, maybe you need to go back to school. Maybe you need to take some training classes, whatever. But if you can determine that kind of stuff before the final decree comes down, that may be something that you can negotiate within your divorce settlement. You just, but the whole point is to know what you want. And you cannot possibly come to any kind of conclusions like that if you were just stuck in the fear and letting it consume you. And, you know, the fear fog is real.
Fear fog. I love it. I was trying to think of a really good little acronym for that. Fear fog. I love it.
Yeah, it
Great job.
really is. And so that's one of the reasons it's so important. We always say that, you know, divorce is 85% emotional and 15% legal. And it's all this emotional work that we have to do in order to make the legal part of it fair and reasonable and also work for us in the aftermath, which kind of brings up the third point, the third fear that we get hit on about a lot, which is the fairness of it all. And fairness, when it comes to divorce, it's threaded all within the tapestry of uncoupling. Because, you know, it starts out, is it fair for me to disrupt or blow up my family? That was where my fairness question is. Or is it fair for him to blow up it, whatever? But when you get past that, it's a huge fear of whether the divorce will be fair in its legalities. You know, a lot of times it's a power struggle because in many situations they make more money or you make more money and you're not. So it's all fairness is a huge fear factor. So again, how is our fear a protective mechanism when it comes to fairness?
You know, this reminds me of a story that an attorney, a divorce attorney, told me recently. A couple were fighting over literally a dustpan. Gets the dustpan. It must have been one hell of a dustpan, but they were fighting. And this was going on for about 10 minutes. They actually left their negotiating room and they were like fighting over this dustpan. And the attorney I was speaking to, a woman said the guy who was with her, you know, was just sitting back watching them fight. He was absolutely content for, you know, to let the bill for his time go ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. And, you know, she went over and said to people, look, you just wasted $200, you know, fighting over this stupid dustpan. Stop the fighting, each go and buy yourself a dustpan. Fairness, you know, so fairness, you know, going through this whole thing and what's fair and how is it going to reflect on me is you have to think about at the end of the day, how do you want to feel? What's really going to be the win for you? And again, fear's the alarm. It's telling you this is an issue for you. This is something you care about. That's all. You just have to recognize this is something I care about. how do you want to feel when this is all done? What's really going to be the win? Because when you figure out what the win is, then you can determine this is fair. Then if you can get to the end and feel, hey, I am proud of who I was. I had some blips, I had some fall downs. That's okay. Everybody does. But I am proud of who I've been going through this process. And it's fair. You've hit fair. So if you look at what you want to get out of it, what's going to be the win for you, aim for that.
Yeah.
Keep that front and center. That helps to quell the fears too.
We started out with the whole tunnel of fear thing. You can think of the F.A.B divorce class and what you learn it as a tunnel that is more of an incubator, a place where you can go, not where your role as your marriage and your role as wife go to die, but where you go to be reborn. And that is the entire notion behind this work we do with you. So definitely click on the link below to get more information about the class and understand that facing and getting through your fears is your way to flourish in your freedom.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just